we're back with the middle part of Talking Law TV, and we're here with Gene Brooks.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Gene. How are you doing?
Good.
So you're here tonight or today to talk to us about Yaz and Yasmin. It's a birth control pill that causes injuries.
It is. It's been associated with an increased risk of stroke and heart attack and gallbladder injuries.
Now, is this two different pills or the same pill?
Well, we have them here on the screen, and Yaz and Yasmin are the two branded drugs. Ocella is the unbranded generic drug.
And it's all really the same thing?
They're all basically the same thing. And basically they're a combination of an estrogen and a progestin. The estrogen that is in it has been around for a long time, but the progestin that is in the drug has been fairly new. So that appears to be what's causing the problem. Sort of like in the Prempro pills, it was a progestin. We eventually found out that it was causing a lot of the breast cancers. And it's the progestin in this that's causing the blood clots.
Okay, and we have a graphic here of some of the injuries that can be caused by this.
Yeah, and most all of these relate to a thickening of the blood because your blood has certain enzymes in it that will cause it to clot. For instance, if you cut your hand, some enzymes are activated and it will form sort of a mesh, and we call it a scab. It hardens, becomes a scab, and that stops the blood. Some of we believe it's the estrogen by itself can change some of the blood chemistry, but this added progestin even causes a more significant problem.
And what should someone do if they've taken this pill in the past? Will they have symptoms?
Well, yeah. For instance, if a deep vein thrombosis, that's the top one, and you got the pulmonary embolism, and we'll take those two by themselves. First, a deep vein thrombosis is when you have that clotting I described earlier form in your leg and in your deep veins in your leg. And you may have sort of some swelling or some discomfort in that leg. Now, if that's where the clot stays, it's okay for the most part. But the problem is it may become an embolism, which means sort of like a floating blood clot. And if it floats or is carried by your veins and your arteries up to your lungs and lodges in one of those areas of your lungs, blocking that blood flow, then that's called a pulmonary embolism. And part of the lung will be injured because it's not getting the blood it needs to survive. For instance, with a stroke, if you have a Yaz-induced stroke, that is when the blood clot lodges not in your lungs, but somewhere in your brain. And so when that happens, there are two types of stroke. Excuse me. You can have a hemorrhagic stroke where the blood vessels bleed out. That's not the type of stroke we're talking about here. We're talking about a clot that forms in the blood and it kills part of the brain. Same way with a heart attack. You have a heart attack here. The clot, instead of going to the lungs or the brain, would go to one of the coronary arteries and block the blood going to the heart. And that would cause that part of the heart to die, can eventually cause death.
Yeah, and we're pretty sure we can recognize that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Not a lot. Mm-hmm. And then these blood clots and kidney failure. Now, I would imagine a lot of young women are taking birth control pills because they're sexually active, but a lot of people maintain taking them for a variety of reasons, to regulate their time of the month.
The long-term use of this drug and many others has nemost been studied. I mean, to get FDA approval, they're doing short-term tests. I mean, from 90 days to a year. And the problem is when these drugs are taken for longer than that, then it can be a problem. For instance, the gallbladder is on here, is one of the injuries too, and that's a little different mechanism than the clotting. But you say if you have a 25-year-old girl who's a young lady who has a normal stature and she comes out and has to have a gallbladder removal, then that needs to be investigated. Somebody that young having a gallbladder removal or having a stroke or a heart attack, those are unusual. And if the young lady's been on the Yaz or Yasmin for 2 or 3 years, which I don't think would be unusual, that is something that really needs to be investigated.
Is this something that would show up in a biopsy of the tissues?
Well, it could be. Really, with clotting, it would be more of a, you could probably see it with an MRI. Well, I think there are imaging studies of the gallbladder and the gallstones. I don't think it's an MRI that's done, but and it's probably not a scope. It's probably more like an ultrasound, where you can image what's going on. You could see, for instance, with a gallbladder, you could see gallstones, but there are other matters. If the gallbladder, which is right under the liver, in which releases the bile that's created in the liver and it aids digestion, if that's not working properly, then you would have digestion problems, for instance, and you would have a lot of pain in the gall.
How do you prove that Yaz or Yasmin caused these injuries?
Well, that can be difficult. I mean, you can't really take a blood test of the clot or of the gallbladder, and it's going to say, I've been injured by Yasmin. Yeah, it doesn't work. But the best way to do it is to first of all, is to document the type of injury that's associated with the drug. Next, establish that the person was taking the drug and for how long they were taking the drug. Those are the two main facts you need to sort of establish the injury. And then at that point, you look at other factors such as their age. I mean, if the 65-year-old has a stroke, you're going to have a lot more difficulty showing it's associated with the birth control pill than if it's somebody who's 25 who has a stroke. Yeah. Same way with the heart attack and the gallbladder removal. So those are other factors that sort of add into it.
Where would a case like this be filed? Would you go down to the Chatham County Courthouse and file it?
You could, but it would probably be removed to federal court because the drug companies or national companies are not based in Georgia, and they'd probably go to federal court, and then from there it would probably be sent to what's called multi-district litigation, because there's this litigation going on all around the country. And multi-district litigation is not really a class action, but in some ways it's sort of a hybrid, because all these cases will be sent to the MDL court, which is established, and that federal judge there would handle the motions and discovery issues that would be common to all the cases. And the cases would be sent back to their home court, in this case to Savannah, where the actions could be tried to a jury.
And we're going to talk more about class actions later, but in a class action, all the people who signed up pretty much get the same award, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And in this kind of case, it would differ.
Correct. These are, in personal injury cases, because the damages aren't all the same. In a pure class action, which is more of a commercial setting, all the damages, for instance, would be the same. If a credit card company, for instance, overcharged everybody $10, everybody's damages would be $10. But in a personal injury case, a product liability case like this, the damages for each degree of injury certainly would be different. Sometimes the courts come up with what we call matrices, or a matrix of type of injury. For like in asbestos cases, you would have, for instance, mesothelioma would be at the high end, just in minor asbestosis would be at the low end, and there would be a gradation all the way down as to how the cases would be settled.
Okay, quick answer. How long do you have to file?
2 years. 2 years from the date you discover that your injury is related to the drug reaction.
Okay, we'll be back with more right after this.